All right, Klaus, we're live. Thanks for joining me on the show. I will give the floor to you to kick us off. Why don't you introduce yourself and a brief overview of your background, who you are, what you've built in the past, and what you're building now.
Yeah, great, Connor. Super. You start that now. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No
So
problem at all.
all good. Who are you? And what are you
Yeah.
building?
My name's Klaus Bartosch. I run a venture capital company combined with a technology and commercialization studio focused on helping health tech founders bring globally high impact products to market to profoundly change the way healthcare is done. And as a venture capital business, we're a little different in that both myself and my other general partners and members of the team are experienced technology founders. We've been there and walked in those shoes, and we have quite deep industry and domain knowledge and capability. We work pretty hard to hopefully make the journey of founders a more enjoyable one than I think most founders frankly experience. And we know because we have the scars to prove it ourselves.
And can you go into a little bit more detail about what you built and scaled and what the result was and what the problem is that you solved that gives you that expertise to advise founders today?
Yeah, so a bit of background. Prior to my last company that I founded in 2011 and then listed on the Australian Stock Exchange in 2015 via an IPO and ran that for another 7 years. Prior to that, worked in a couple of other businesses, one of which was responsible for supporting and managing the top online businesses in Australia. And in fact, that business, which had about 70 clients, was responsible for about 25% of all Australian internet page views. So it was a pretty significant capability as a business. But that led to having that company was a listed business as well. It exited in 2008 and then went about with the same team, starting another company, and then left that to start my previous business, First Group. And it was a health tech business focused on enabling consumers to interact with healthcare private practices, healthcare doctors, physios, chiros, dentists in a digital way. I mean, if you think about it like this, back in 2011, we were already all, as consumers globally, doing so much online with other services. We're booking accommodation, booking airfares, doing all sorts of things online, and yet the mere act of scheduling an appointment to see a doctor was still being done by telephone and being done when their business was open. And yet almost everything else we could do conveniently online, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that was the problem we sought to solve, which was to make engaging with healthcare services easier. And the first problem we sought to solve was just the act of how you schedule an appointment with a doctor. And so fast forward over those years, we ended up with about 14,000 healthcare businesses across Australia and New Zealand, across multiple healthcare modalities, partnered with health insurers, private hospitals, and engaged about 18 million Australians with not only the act of booking an appointment, but of facilitating a more convenient way for them to do that. And in fact, an interesting story that kind of relates to that business is 2 years into the venture, after we launched the service, I happened to be cycling to raise money for cancer research and have arthritis in my right knee and was about to embark on a significant number of charity rides around Australia and New Zealand. And in 2013, at 9:30 at night, I was complaining about my knee and worried about my ability to complete the next ride. And my wife said, look, stop complaining, get online and book your doctor, which we could do through our own platform, which I did. That led to a discovery a week later that I had leukemia, was immediately hospitalized, and was fortunate because the outcome of that was that ability to take action at my moment of worry and concern, even when my practice was closed, led to a fortunate discovery that had I not done that, I'm told, a week later I would have been dead. So I was very fortunate that took place. And so that kind of led to a realization that, early intervention, preventative care programs are critically important to people. And there's so much about the way healthcare works today that is still archaic. I mean, I think it's the only category left on earth that still uses fax machines, right? I mean, it's strange.
So I'm curious just to back up a bit. How did you get involved in healthcare, health tech to begin with? Was that intentional? Because it sounds like some of the first businesses you built were more just technology focused. Were you intentionally entering the healthcare space to say, I know it's broken, it has its issues, and I want to fix it? Or did you just stumble upon a problem that needed solving and you
Yeah,
solved it?
great question. When the last business was started, I had a co-founder who joined me for the first couple of years, but it was a dentist with an idea, and the idea was to solve a problem he had, which was last-minute cancellations and how to fill them. And he felt that enabling the ability for people to schedule and reschedule their own appointments online would help him do that. And so he and I were introduced through a mutual friend, and we very quickly realized that the strategy that needed to be adopted would needed to be much more significant and wider. And so he had the genesis of an idea. I had the technology and commercialization skills to help create and build that business. He discovered fairly early on that, and we kind of had this conversation from the outset that as a dentist, that he might find himself a bit of a fish out of water, getting involved in doing things that were perhaps unfamiliar territory. And so he ended up returning back to dentistry. Good friends, good guy. But I then continued to lead and grow the company to listing on the stock exchanges, set and exiting. And so that's kind of how the genesis began, which was, someone had an idea, needed some additional capability, and combined we came up with a revised strategy that was, I think, much more comprehensive for the market more generally.
And then, so what drives your passion today to be a VC in the health tech space? Is it more rooted in your experience with your cancer and leukemia care, where you said this really triggered the passion, and I want to help improve this system that touches so many people's lives and is so important, or was it more related to the company that you built?
Look, it's a little bit of one of those things, but it's more of something else. And so over those years, I pitched to VCs, family offices, high net worths to raise capital, and raised quite a lot of money for that last business, over 36 million all up, and in multiple tranches, and found that those, especially VCs and family offices, less so family offices, but VCs, didn't really add much value beyond corporate advice and strategic advice. And it became very clear from my own experience in health tech in particular that there's a knowledge and depth of capability that is lacking in the investor market around healthcare. Healthcare has complexities. I mean, we call it healthcare, but it's actually hundreds of markets. It's not just one category. And so it is a rather unique and interesting space, and discovered through my own experience that as a founder, there are so many things that we don't know that we need to know to be effective in executing an early stage business. So the combination of both our own experiences and my experiences, the lack of real value add that I think VCs generally provide. And I think it's why in the US, for example, there are these founder-led venture capital businesses who just have a depth of understanding and experience for kind of what goes on in the journey of a founder that means that they can have a quality of dialogue and discussion with a founder that I think is different to traditional VC. I think of VCs as institutionalized finance people, good at spreadsheets, good at corporate advice, good at capital structures and engagements, but don't necessarily bring the level of domain knowledge and experience to the table to help a founder execute well. And that's what we kind of landed on. And so the inspiration for the business was, how can we bring the knowledge and skill that we've gained over the years in health tech to other founders, and helping more of them become successful in their markets? Because most founders make all the same common mistakes, and those mistakes are avoidable. They're preventable with the right knowledge and expertise. And so the strategy was, let's build a venture capital business focused on health tech where we have real domain knowledge and capability, coupled with a technology and commercialization studio, so a team that founders can lean on should they want to help them execute their innovations more efficiently and more effectively without the typical early wasted capital with attempts to iterate and find product market fit, and building teams that don't always work well together, and just making all the classic mistakes that they make. And we talk about it, and I talk about it on our own website, that there are 21 classic challenges that tech founders face, and there are 9 or 10 of them that are pretty significant, that how a founder is meant to have expertise across all those things, is beyond me, which is, I think, it's a real challenge. And so we wanted to help. And part of the motivation for that is healthcare actually hasn't fundamentally changed the way it operates and works for a century. Just let me let that sink in for a moment, because it's a pretty bold and important statement. For example, the blood pressure machines that are used today in primary care is technology that was invented 200 years ago, hasn't fundamentally changed. And yet there are known new innovations that are vastly more improved and better than those devices. So healthcare needs to go through more significant change, because amongst other things, there isn't a government, private health insurer or hospital on the planet that isn't wrestling with the cost of care and the unsustainability of their business models. And they all know over the next decade, they've got some real serious challenges, that they're in trouble, both with resources, the method of delivery. I mean, the entire industry is reactive. You have a symptom, we will now fix you. And the cost of doing that and the access to those services is just, completely unsustainable. And so, health technology has kind of progressed to the point now where we have mobile devices with extraordinary power. AI has evolved in a way that is quite extraordinary. Virtual reality, Web3, content engagement. There's a whole set of technology capabilities that didn't exist even 5 years ago, that are really critical in having, I think, the kind of innovations that we're seeing today that are going to have a profound impact on the way healthcare is being done. And so, I think we've got an opportunity here to help those founders with those great, bold, global ideas, bring those technologies to market, and in the process may save tens of millions of lives and improve the lives of millions others. As a result of doing that, what couldn't be more enjoyable than, frankly, knowing that the legacy you leave behind is that kind of impact?
Yeah, 100%. So I think there's a lot to unpack in terms of the healthcare system as a whole. And I want to back up, and maybe if we can focus on your experience, considering you had leukemia, obviously it seems you're doing very well now. So it seems as though the healthcare system solved your very scary problem. But from your perspective, are there things that could have been done differently? Or, as a cancer patient yourself, like, what is the experience like? How could it be improved? Are you working with companies that are improving on maybe cancer treatment and care and things along those lines?
So here's the thing, right? If you look at that for as an example, the healthcare system focused on the treatment I required, but gave no consideration and no support for the people that were impacted around me. So my wife, my children, my immediate family, those carers, the healthcare system provided no appreciation and support for at all. And that's part of the problem. The healthcare system thinks that the solution to a problem is diagnosis. Once you're diagnosed, I've given you diagnosis, you're on your own in some cases. Or B, provides you with treatment, but then doesn't deal with all of the other impacts that are associated with your experience. And so we now recognize mental health issues as a serious problem. And we all know that the quality of your mental health has a direct impact on your overall health. And so if you're dealing with a significant health issue like cancer, and the system isn't at the same time supporting you to enable you to be in a good headspace to go through that journey, then you're already disadvantaged, because you're now in a crappy headspace and dealing with other burdens, and that's unhelpful to the journey. So I think taking a more holistic view of that experience in healthcare, being more proactive, is really important. So that's just one example. I mean, there are numerous examples, but I think the system can and needs to do more. I mean, it actually doesn't function in an integrated way, in the way that we all think. I mean, clinicians don't collaborate together the way we think, as in if I've got a physio, a chiro, a GP, a natural therapist, an orthopedic surgeon, and a psychologist, and they're all working together to support, they're all working to help me. They're not collaborating and working together as a team, as a general rule, and they should. And so I think they each work in their own silo, and they each have their own area of speciality. If you go to an orthopedic surgeon, he's going to want to do surgery. There may be other options available to you to solve that problem, but how do you know? And so there are some real challenges in the way that healthcare is being delivered and done, and I think it's a frustration as much for clinicians as it is for the system as a whole. It's complex. The way the payment system works is complex, and that drives a lot of the behaviours as well.
What are your thoughts on the incentivization structure in healthcare where, to your point, an orthopedist or even an oncologist, right, is paid based on the number of cancer patients they are seeing and helping resolve their issues? But in terms of trying to control costs from an insurance company perspective or a government perspective, they want to have less services utilized. So how do you reckon with that? People need these services, but the more that they're utilized, the more that it drives up costs, which is, I think, the key driver in the unsustainability of it.
Yeah, look, this is going to sound terrible to say. Lawyers and healthcare providers have something in common, which most other industries don't have. Let me try and give you an analogy to explain the point. If you took your car to a mechanic and his job was to fix it, and he gave it back to you and it wasn't fixed but still expected you to pay, what would you do and how would you react? And yet, in healthcare, we go to a doctor, we get a treatment, it doesn't work, and we're supposed to still pay that bill and think that's okay. That's nuts. It's the same with a lawyer. You get legal advice, the advice may be poor or ineffective, or you end up failing the particular lawsuit otherwise that you're doing. They still get paid even though they didn't succeed in what they were doing. A little different in legal because it's got its own complexities, but I find it extraordinary that a system gets paid regardless of the quality of the outcome. And that's the problem with healthcare today, is that it is completely not structured around outcome-based performance and should be. Why should a clinician be paid irrespective of the quality of the outcome of their service? I know that they'll argue why, but it doesn't make any sense. And I think, and the industry knows it's got to move more and more to outcome-based goals, and it will make that transition progressively. And technology is going to play a pivotal role in helping with that, inevitably. So that's just an example of one of the things that's wrong with that system, and the other is it's a payer-driven model. So in Australia, for example, we're a fortunate country that has a government system called Medicare that funds most of our healthcare needs and requirements. And so doctors here actually don't see the patient as the customer; they see Medicare as the customer because Medicare is the one that's paying them. In fact, I actually think that one of the problems with the way healthcare thinks about itself is that they call us patients and don't think of us as customers. And if they thought of us as customers, I often wonder whether the behaviours would be different in the way that they engage with their patients.
One other point I want to bring up about healthcare, and I always think that this is kind of crazy, and at least the way it works in the United States, right? If you buy health insurance, there's no maximum lifetime coverage limit, and basically covers everything regardless of lifestyle, history, personal decisions, and responsibilities, right? So I think, kind of to your point, the cheapest way to run a healthcare system is to have nobody get cancer, for example, but a lot of that is outside of the healthcare system's control, right? There's externalities about lifestyle decisions and genetics and things like that that are outside of the doctor's control, the healthcare system's control. But yet they're still required, to your point, to care for that patient or that customer, and then to your point, kind of need to have an outcome. But how do you deal with that when people have so much freedom to live their life however they want, and then they show up at the doctor and they say, hey, I need my hip replaced, I smoked my whole life and I have lung cancer, but now you have to care for me? How do you handle that where people need those services, but yet it's decisions outside of the system that are driving the need for care.
So I don't think it's penalising people for making poor lifestyle choices that's the solution or the answer here, but incentivising the right behaviours that provide them with a benefit. So we are seeing already innovations globally that are, including health insurers, encouraging and incentivising their members to make better lifestyle choices that result in reduced cost of care, reduced cost of membership fees, if you like. And I think that we're going to see more and more of that over time, where people are being incentivized by their life insurance policies or by their health insurance policies or by their employer to make better decisions around improving their overall well-being and making better choices about smoking, drinking, they eat, etc., and the quality of their oral health. And all of those things have a huge impact on people's overall well-being. I mean, most folks don't realize that your oral health is at the very core of overall body health, and yet people don't take enough care of of the quality of their mouth health, and yet they should. Everything goes through it that into your body, and if it's going through a septic pit to get into your gut, none of that's going to be helpful for your long-term well-being. And so, there's a whole range of things that I think we can and should be doing. And so I think healthcare you can incentivize the right behaviors. And plus, there is a growing significant trend by people who are recognizing that we're all now likely to live beyond 100. The younger you are, the more likely you're going to live to 110, 120. And that presents its own set of interesting challenges. But the thing we're seeing now in our elderly parents is, what did they do to ensure that as they got into their 80s and 90s that they had a reasonable quality of life and a reasonable health to enable those last years to be comfortable and useful? And I think they haven't. And so I think as the younger generation, mine and those younger than me, we're recognizing that and making choices around what can we do to avoid chronic health conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular disease and cancer and others, and what can we do about our general physical well-being and strength and fitness and stability, and what can we do about our overall kind of diet and weight, and make sure that we know that we're going to be able to live a healthy and good life later in life. And the decisions we make in our 30s and 40s have a profound impact on the downstream experience we're going to have. And so I think there's certainly a growing awareness of that, and there are some terrific products and tools coming out into the market that are enabling that. One that launched quite recently is a platform called superpower.com that's founded by an Australian based in California, significant backing. That is, one of the kind of innovations that we're seeing that is really enabling people to get access to the insights, advice, support, telemetry that they need to make good choices. And I think we're going to see more and more of that over time.
Yeah, so you mentioned incentivizing the right behavior, and you mentioned startups like superpower.com. How do you know you're incentivizing the right behavior? I'm not sure if you could speak to maybe the science behind that or the biomarkers, but is that what you're getting at? Because I think, too, what I thought of when you mentioned that is, hey, start a corporate wellness program and encourage people to walk more. But I'm just wondering, that, in my opinion, is not enough. So how do you know that you're truly tracking the right data biomarkers that are going to change how outcomes and predictably say that this person's, because of these markers, this person's healthcare spend is going to be substantially less than this other person?
Look, I think it's about patient or person-centered, and therefore providing them with the tools that they need to make those decisions and choices. And that's what these products are seeking to do, is empowering you to enable you to be better informed about what's actually going on. Do I have a mental health issue? How can I, in my own private space with a platform, seek to better understand that? And what should I do if I do? How do I know whether or not I've got an emerging diabetes problem, and how can I test and validate and monitor that? How do I know? So I think it's just providing people with insights through the range of telemetry that you can get access through with wearables, range of blood tests and DNA tests and other tests you can get that give you those insights that I think are going to help people understand how their body and well-being is evolving, rather than waiting until, shit, I've got a symptom now. What do I now do? It is accepted by the industry globally, by everyone, that early intervention drives good outcomes. And as I mentioned earlier, with my own experience, was my ability to have identified a symptom and could take action early led to a discovery that was the least of what I expected would take place. And so I think those insights really matter. And I think these platforms are increasingly going to provide people with a better understanding of what's actually going on. I mean, another way to think about it is like this, right? You buy a new car, you get provided a manual and a service manual. And that service manual says you must do these things at 10,000 miles, at 20,000 miles, at 50,000 miles, at 100,000 miles. And you religiously go and take your vehicle in to get those services done. Why? Because we all know that the last thing we want is the inconvenience of a breakdown. When we're born, we don't get given the manual. And actually, the healthcare system has defined that it exists. The information is there. In Australia, it's called the Red Book. Ironically, it's also the same name they use for cars in some parts of the world. But it's a manual that says these are the 15 cancer screenings you should get through different stages in your life. These are the different other screenings that you should get in different stages of your life. But we aren't given that manual, and we aren't provided that kind of support and care. And I think you will see technologies emerge that increasingly provide people with that guidance, that help them understand that when you turn 50, there are certain things that you should do. When you turn 40, there are certain things that you should be doing. And if you're a male, there are other tests you do, and if you're female, there are other tests that you should do. But these tests are important because they provide you with early insight into potential downstream problems, and better you get on top of them early than later, and wait for them to appear. Once they've appeared, often it's too late. So I think we're going to see more of that over time.
And do you have any data that kind of exemplifies that ROI or savings if people were to perform those types of preventive measures in screenings? I mean, how much of an impact would that make on the healthcare system? Maybe in Australia, for example.
So look, so here's a data point that's worth knowing. 1/3 of all deaths in the world are caused by cardiovascular disease. 80% of those are entirely preventable. The cost in the US alone to the US economy is $420 billion. What's needed to reduce the impact of that are early screenings and quite simple interventions, lifestyle interventions, both omega-3 supplements and exercise and diet, and an awareness of the likely risk of cardiovascular disease that you have. And there are quite straightforward, simple screening processes available to do that. So in terms of a data point, it's just one example of a area of impact on people's lives and death, of which 80% is entirely preventable. And as an industry, healthcare is reactive to people having those symptoms, but not proactive about helping them understand that they've got a downstream risk and how to do that. In fact, the current method for determining cardiovascular disease is 50% inaccurate, which means half the people who get told they don't have a problem have a problem. And that's recognized globally. The science is behind there to prove that. And it's just that there'll be changes that will drive that outcome. That's just one example, and there are numerous others. And so it's clear that if you can get someone into healthcare early, the cost of care is substantially lower. The impact on their personal lives is substantially lower, and you get them back into work faster, which has a positive impact on their experience in the workplace as well and their personal income. So there is plenty of evidence to point to the advantages of managing and treating issues and problems early and even avoiding them entirely. And so, like I said, the best analogy I can give you is a brand new car. You service it for a reason. Why aren't you doing it for yourself?
So to push back on that a little bit, what about the people that just don't care? You can present them all the data, all the tools. You just need to do these things to take care of your health, and they say, I don't want to go to the doctor. I want to make my own decisions. I want to eat what I want. I don't want to exercise. I want to smoke, for example. How do you get through to those people? Or do you think that those people represent a substantial portion of the population? Or if presented with the right information, will people make the right decisions?
So my view on that is that you can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink. And there are inevitably a portion of the population that will ignore the obvious, but there's also a portion of the population that hasn't got access that if they could would. And so I don't think the opportunity isn't here to improve the lives and save the lives of everyone. It's to improve the lives and save the lives of those willing to engage and take action. And I think what will happen over time, like all things, is that people will be influenced by what's happening around them, and will start doing more of the things other people are doing around them. And so I think what we'll see is a progression of people making decisions based on what their friends and family and others are experiencing around them and going, oh, okay, well, maybe I should do that too. It'll be a slow, fortunate transition, Connor, that's probably going to take another century for people on the planet to realise that they need to think differently about their own personal journey through life and how to improve the likelihood that it's a better one from a health perspective. And technology is going to help facilitate that. I mean, if you were, if your mobile phone triggered and notified you that there was a likely risk, you might take action. If the smartwatch you're wearing is determining that it looks like you might be about to have a stroke, and you didn't know that was one of the things it was detecting, you might take action. So there are interventions that can work that are unexpected, that can have a profound impact on people's lives. And I think we'll see technologies increasingly playing an important role like that.
Yeah, so you bring up an interesting point about technology, and I know that's what you're focused on, health tech specifically, and you brought this up earlier, that the aging population, I know globally that's a challenge as the baby boomers retire. And as you get older, I think regardless of how healthy you are, your expenditure in healthcare goes up, and the governments of the world will bear the burden of that. So you mentioned technology, but also the unsustainable costs of healthcare. And I think that's only going to rise as more people enter their 60s and 70s. So how do you think about that? And can technology kind of come in to, I don't want to say save us, but help mitigate that problem where the advancement in technology can kind of outrun the increased burden on the system that's going to happen over the next 10, 20 years?
So the short answer is we're seeing tremendous innovations coming out that are helping people, the aging population, manage their risks better. As an example, there are now in the home things you can wear that begin to detect your probability of a fall risk. In aged care, in older people, the greatest risk to death and rapid decline is a fall. And we have technologies now that are able to detect through just the way you walk, the way you move, whether you're increasingly becoming at risk of falling due to balance and or the way that you're moving, and helping you understand that early and helping guide you with the decisions and actions you can take to avoid that is important. And it's being done through both cameras in the home using AI. It's being done with wearables that do that. And that's just one example of what I think we're going to see an increasing amount of. People want to stay in their home longer and not end up in residential care, aged care, nursing home facilities. And the best way that they're going to be able to achieve that is by making sensible decisions around their personal health and well-being, by being aware of the growing risk of the change that's occurring in their body and movement. One of the challenges with, and it's not just aged care, but I'll give you an idea of the problem with eyesight. I mean, people go blind in their old age, and 90% of that blindness is again entirely preventable. The problem is that the diseases that cause blindness in old people emerge over many, many years, and so it's a progressive, slow change, and you just naturally adjust to it. By the time you realize that you've got a problem, you've usually already lost 40 to 60% of your eyesight, and the problem there is it's now irreversible. And so there are things that you can do that enable that kind of early detection and management. And so, I think we increasingly will see those tools enable people to get access to information to help them make decisions and choices. I mean, in the US, you don't have the benefit of the access to the kind of free services we do here to take more of those decisions and actions. I mean, in Australia, for example, the day you turn 50, the government sends you a package and says, we want a bowel sample from you because we want to avoid the risk of bowel cancer in aging people in this country. Fully funded government pathology service where you get to poop in a bag and at their expense send it back to the government. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that?
Yeah.
But it's a proactive stance that's saving the country an enormous amount of money. In other countries, it's about how do you enable people who don't have access to those same types of funded services to still be able to make good decisions and get help. And I think we'll find mobile phone devices, apps, wearable, and other opportunities for people in countries where those services aren't available, or people who are less fortunate to be able to fund these things themselves, to still get access to a lot of those opportunities to manage their health better. And I think that's one of the really nice things about what I think technology is enabling. And so we're going to see that in the aging population. We're going to see it in younger people. We're seeing some remarkable innovations coming out for mental health. But the challenge still here is, from a founder's perspective, is how do you validate that what you're building is right? How do you know that you're going about innovating and creating what you need to in the right way, and what's the best way and the most effective way to bring it to market? Founders make all the most common mistakes, and for all the accelerators that exist in the world, they don't seem to be helping founders necessarily avoid many of those errors and mistakes that they're making as they're going about trying to bring to market a product that they believe could have a profound impact on people's lives and well-being.
So one other question I want to talk about healthcare, and I know at least in the U.S., I would imagine Australia has a similar problem, is the supply of physicians is not keeping up with the demand for healthcare services. And I think specifically in the United States, a big reason for that is the burden that a physician has to take on to become a physician, right? 10 years of schooling, $500,000 in debt. Are you working on any projects, or what is your perspective and opinion on how technology can help enter more physicians into the workforce? And I think if there was a greater supply of services, we'd also see the price come down when you have multiple options of which doctor to see, and they're all of high quality. You'll go to the one that costs less. Are you looking at that at all? Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point, because the reality is that we will never be able to move fast enough to bring enough physicians into the market to support the growing demand and need. And so when you unpack kind of what's the actual underlying problem here, the underlying problem here is that there are several things clogging up the system. The worried well. There are people taking up time from clinicians who actually don't have a problem at all. They're just the worried well. And to give an example, the primary primary care market here in Australia would argue about 2/3 of people who see doctors here are the worried well, unnecessarily consuming time and energy. And so how could you solve and resolve that? How could you enable these people to make better decisions and choices? There are people who are ending up in emergency departments that don't need to end up in emergency departments, who could end up somewhere else. There are people seeking mental health issues, mental health support, but if you actually solve the problem from the kind of source, so what is the underlying core reason that these things occur? It's because we're not building resilience. We're not making the right choices and decisions around avoiding ending up in the healthcare situation in the first place. And so I think we can't, simply growing the number of physicians on the planet isn't going to solve the problem. Changing the way we think about our overall well-being and the decisions and choices that we make, and arming consumers with tools and platforms that facilitate and help them to avoid the need to see a clinician is actually at the core of what I think we're seeing as the greatest innovations that are coming out on the planet. And that's very much at the core of what superpower.com is about as an example, which is to try to enable that. Because I don't know what it's like in the States. I'm sure it's the same as it is here. But if you've got a mental health problem in Australia, it's a 6-week wait to see a psychologist. And we also know, by the way, if you unpack the psychology market as one example in terms of what are the challenges in that category, 90% of people who should get mental health care services aren't. Only 10% are. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that there are people who are, it's a big decision to have to make to decide I need help. So imagine, though, if more people did. I mean, the current system isn't coping with just 10% of people getting help. What happens if that grows to 20% of people? Then it's already broken and it can't work. And then to add more kind of challenge to that issue is that once you've decided to see a psychologist, and maybe the psychology is different in the US than it is here, but generally speaking, for someone to make a decision to get mental health support, it's as nerve-wracking as asking for your first date. Sweaty arms, the fear, and the acceptance of a whole bunch of stuff. So it's a nerve-wracking decision to make. Once you finally do make the decision, you reach out and you schedule an appointment to see a psychologist for some help. 75% of first consults fail to proceed to a second and subsequent consult, and that person and 90% of them never go on to seek an alternative service provider to help them. And the reason is that they didn't find the first consult, they didn't have the rapport with that individual to enable them to actually get, to feel comfortable to open up about the concerns that they've actually got. So there are some fundamental things that aren't really working that we're going to see technology help and enable.
So I think we've established that there's probably almost countless problems that could be solved in the healthcare space. And so maybe if we can pivot a bit to anybody that is a founder or considering becoming a founder, why the health tech space? As a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have so many options, so many different directions you can go. Why should you start a company in the health tech space?
It is one of the top 3 hottest categories on earth because the problem that is materializing is so significant and so real. And we've talked about just a very, very small sample set of those challenges and problems. Most founders generate health tech innovations because of some kind of lived experience. They've experienced a problem, believe that it's widespread, and then seek and to identify how they think they might seek to solve that problem. But similarly, most health tech founders aren't technology experts. They might be a domain expert in a particular category. They might even be a clinician. There might be a patient who has experienced the problem firsthand and believe that they have got a solution to solve that problem. But most founders in health tech have never built a technology platform before, certainly never brought it to market before, and let alone raised capital, commercialized it, built it, and gone on the journey. And there's a lot that they need to learn as part of that experience and process. But in terms of why should someone become a health tech founder, it is, I think, one of the most rewarding categories to be involved in, because what you're doing is helping improve the lives of others, potentially even save lives of others. And what could be more rewarding than that experience? And I think that's what motivates virtually every health tech founder that we spend time with, is they're driven by a higher purpose that is beyond creating a unicorn and making a shitload of money. That is actually about the purpose and impact that they're seeking to have. And I think that's what drives the majority of health tech founders to do what they do. In fact, I almost can't think of a health tech founder where that isn't true. So, and that's one of the reasons why we like the category, is that we're dealing with people who are genuinely passionate about the impact they're seeking to create, and they're driven by, I think, what the problem they're trying to solve in a way that is very different to a fintech platform and other kind of technologies that you see being innovated, which have their place, but there is a lot more emotion and passion attributed to health tech. And when you see the teams that get involved in these projects, every single employee feels and experiences the same purpose-driven intent of what they're trying to create and why it matters. And that's super cool.
So to that point, I think to make that impact right, you need to do it well and you need to do it right. And so maybe we can get into those biggest stumbling blocks that you see founders run into, considering that you've lived it yourself, and I'm sure you've worked with numerous founders in the space currently. So I don't know if you could boil it down at a very high level overview, maybe, the top 5 mistakes that you see people make.
Yeah, and look, I'll add by saying, I'm an experienced IT tech guy for 35 years, and even though I started my last company as an experienced tech guy, I still made a series of mistakes that I hadn't had personal experience with at the time. And so even though I'd felt I'd had tremendous experience, there were still things that I didn't properly understand and know that I know now. But let me kind of take you through what I think are some of the kind of big challenges that a founder makes. The first is, at a high level, there are about 20 different deep skill sets a founder needs to have to be successful. They don't have them. They can't have them. Unless they've been a founder 4 or 5 times, they won't have those experiences to be able to do that. I mean, for example, if you're a founder who's got an idea and you've got lived experience with the technology, you might be a clinician, you know nothing about how to hire a CTO, how to hire the other skill sets, how to hire the right sales team, how to hire the right marketing people, how to put in place all the right strategies, let alone raising capital. So if you kind of walk through what are the top things that people don't know how to do and actually end up screwing up almost always in every early stage business, it's, their lack of kind of previous IT skills means that they're often looking for what they call a co-founder CTO. It's the first strategic mistake. First of all, it's an arranged marriage. You've no idea whether it's going to work because it's not someone that you know that you're seeking to bring on board. And because you don't have the technical expertise, you've got no idea whether that person is actually going to have the right core skills and capabilities necessary to help you. That's a big decision. Even just hiring a CTO is a big and complex decision to do, and making sure you get that right. So how do you do that as a founder successfully? How do you make sure that you get the right CTO on board? Remembering the CTO you have in the first 2 years of your journey will be different when it moves into scale up, different when it moves into expanding even beyond. Most CTOs can't transition between the different stages of growth of a company. So that's a challenge in itself. The next kind of problem you have is you got to hire a team of people, maybe 5, 10, 20 people. They're people that have never worked together before. You've got no idea what their real depth of skills are like, how successfully they're going to actually collaborate and work well together, whether they're going to work well together. And if they don't, you've got a nightmare on your hands. And chances are you'll have probably got half of them wrong. You'll be hiring and firing and hiring and firing to try to find the right people that you need to help you execute that project well. And if you don't get it right, you end up with a underperforming team making poor decisions and executing your idea badly, and wasted capital and time to market as a consequence of those outcomes. The kind of third challenge you've got is, if you do hire a team, how are you going to keep them engaged? How do you do that? That's actually challenging itself. Fourth is raising money, raising capital. Most founders haven't raised capital before. Most founders get 4 knockbacks and go, oh my God, I'm not going to get any money. experienced founders know that you're probably going to pitch 100 times before you get your first investor. So you've got to be resilient enough to take 100 knockbacks before you get your first person putting in the first amount of capital in the business. And that's challenging and demeaning. How do you know how to build the right investor presentation? How do you learn from those experiences? I mean, there's a whole lot of capability and skill necessary in just the capital raising process alone. The next thing is product market fit. What I think of as more broadly is the commercialization strategy. If you haven't defined from the outset how you plan to commercialize what you're building, validating that there is the way I describe it is, what's the problem you're solving, who you're solving it for, and how do you know they want it solved? What evidence have you got to support the view that it actually wants to be solved? Some problems don't want to be solved. I mean, the status quo, which is what most folks are trying to resolve, is really hard to change. Changing the way people do things today to doing something different tomorrow is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So product market fit is a very challenging thing, but there's a lot you can do before you build your first piece of code to seek to understand and validate that from the outset. Most people go in, spend a bunch of money building what they think is their first MVP. I actually think of it as a POC, a proof of concept, believing that they've got the right functions and capability necessary to meet a market requirement, discover that it isn't quite resonating with the customer, and then begin to iterate and learn in market. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's the only way you can find product market fit, but there's a lot you can do before you spend money on building code to establish whether or not you're likely to find product market fit. And that comes by defining your MVP sensibly and properly. Part of the commercialization strategy is understanding what your business model is going to be. And is it work? Can you validate that the business model is going to be right? And then the other thing that founders do, there's two other things I think are really critical, is total addressable market, TAM, is almost always massively overstated. And so there's a view, it's a $5 billion market. Actually, no, it's not. If you do your homework well, drill into it accurately and understand the product and segment you're going after, you might discover it's a much smaller market, but a very potent one, so a good one. But getting TAM right matters. And then the last thing that I hear and I see all the time is founders don't do their homework to understand what competition exists out there and how is what they're going to be doing significantly different or better than what the competition is currently doing. There's almost always a competitor somewhere in the world doing something. And if they're in a different geography, go and learn from them. I mean, Australians often innovate things here that are being done in the US and vice versa. They don't have to be first. Being first doesn't always matter. But doing that homework, working through all of that sensibly and well, I've just touched on kind of 9 challenges that founders face. There are 21 big ones that I list on our website that really matter. But these are the things that, they're easier for someone like myself who's got the experience to list them out. But when you're a founder, you don't know what you don't know. So where do you get the advice, support, and counsel from to help you? And that's a big part of what at Dreamoro Ventures we're seeking to do, which is to bring more of that capability to help founders execute their ideas more effectively and hopefully achieve product market fit faster, waste less capital, and have an experience with less scars on their back, where they can actually say how that was an enjoyable journey that they had went on versus the torturous one that most founders actually experience, which isn't talked about. We all see these unicorns that 5 years later they've sold for $1 billion or more and go, oh my God, wasn't that a fantastic journey? And the reality is most successful unicorns were an overnight success after 10 years of trying. And it's a difficult, challenging journey, and people have to understand that that's the journey that they're going on and hopefully find around them the right mentors, the right people willing to support them, remembering that as a founder, you're also swimming in a shark tank of people all wanting a piece of you, wanting to sell you something and offer you a service and take a piece of your pie. And so choosing who you work with and what shareholders you get on board, what advisors you get, what external third-party providers you engage with, they're all complex decisions that you want to make sure you get right. Otherwise, you could make a fatal decision and discover that your brilliant idea fails because you got the wrong shareholder on board, or brought the wrong advisor on board, or got the wrong board on board, or hired the wrong CTO. The next thing you know, you're in a nightmare dealing with a divorce or another challenge within your own business that you didn't expect to have, even though the idea itself was sound.
Yeah. I think you've made a lot of great points. I don't know if you've painted the rosiest picture for maybe somebody that hasn't thought through it thoroughly, though. So it sounds like there's obviously a lot of areas for mistakes, a lot of failures, a lot of pitfalls. But with all that considered, I mean, from your perspective, for maybe somebody that has tried and failed in the past or is thinking about starting a business, is it worth it? I mean, you've just mentioned a lot of things that people need to overcome that it seems like a very difficult journey, but is it worth it and why?
It is a challenging journey, no question. Is it worth it? Man, that depends on how well you go about it. If you've gone at it once and failed, you've actually earned some stripes, hopefully gained some insights and knowledge and experience. If you haven't learned anything from that, maybe you don't proceed. Chances are you've learned a lot from that first time round. Have another go. I mean, I think if my own view about this stuff, Connor, is that if you're driven by purpose, by what you're doing, you'll persist. Because that's actually what's driving you. That's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you motivated every day to get up every day and keep cracking away at it, because you believe deeply in the purpose of what you're building, the impact it's going to have on society, on people's lives and otherwise. If you're not driven by that, and you don't have the underlying kind of bloody-minded resilience to push through, then you're going to fail because it's hard. So I think I think painting a rosy picture is a problem, and I get deeply disturbed by the fact that so many accelerators allow any entrepreneur in with any crazy idea, even if they don't have the fundamentals to succeed, in the belief that anyone can learn how to do this. It's not true. There are other characteristics and capabilities you need to succeed, and so I think recognizing it's not an easy journey, but at the end of the day, building something that's fantastic, learning through those experiences, recognizing that every failure that you have, every poor decision that you make is a learning experience and something that you should hold up with, and view with gratitude and genuinely feel good about is important. But that's a headspace thing. I mean, people don't deal with failure well. And as a founder, you have to see failure as an opportunity and recognize that it's opportunity every single time. And that's changing the way the brain is logically designed to think and operate. But if you can do that, you'll succeed. I think and you may not succeed with the first idea. It might take the next one. That's okay. But building your own company, having a great impact, building a good team of people around you, knowing that your customers love what you're doing, knowing the people that you're servicing are benefiting tremendously from what you're creating, that's incredibly rewarding. And I think in health tech in particular, immensely rewarding. I mean, I would hear, for example, thousands of times that a mother at 2:00 in the morning was able to schedule an appointment for her child, her baby, the next morning with a GP, immediately enabled her to relax and fall asleep knowing that she had certainty of an appointment to see a doctor the next day. That's a wonderful feeling, knowing that you can have that kind of impact by just the act of facilitating someone to schedule an appointment to see a doctor. And I think that those stories are the ones that drive you when you're building things in health tech, is when you realize the impact you're having is really, really profound and important.
Yeah, to wrap us up here, just a couple of questions for you, kind of opinion questions. So knowing everything that you've built, all the failures that you've been through, what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Gosh, what a terrific question. What advice would I give myself? I think. Let me think about it for a moment. I think that the key thing is not being blinded by the passion of what I'm pursuing, and thinking through some decisions and some actions more rationally than I think I have in the past would be probably the greatest advice I'd give myself. It's actually easier to say, but incredibly hard to do. Because as a founder, you're wired to push through. That's part of the job. But at the same time, you need to be sensible and rational about the choices you're making and the decisions you're making to make sure that you don't find yourself with the wrong advisor, you don't find yourself with the wrong board member, you don't find yourself with the wrong shareholder, that you haven't made the decision to add a piece of function in the belief that you think it's going to succeed and help improve the product when you haven't done the homework to validate that it's actually going to be true or not. And make the hard decisions. Know when people aren't working. Restructure your company and costs. Be brave enough to make those challenging decisions and choices. I think there's a book that Ben Horowitz wrote. I think it's called what's it called now? The thing about hard choices, right? So hard decisions, hard choices, they're important. The hard thing about hard things is the name of the book. And I think that book encapsulates beautifully the kind of things that I'm trying to describe, which is recognizing that there are decisions you have to make that are difficult and being prepared to make them, but also seeing things in the way that you should see them in reality. It's a difficult journey. It's not easy, I'm afraid.
All right, one more question. Let's say tomorrow you lose everything, no more Dreamoro, $0 in your bank account. How are you starting over? What are you doing? What are you building, and why?
So, like all good founders, there's always another idea in the back pocket that you're thinking about as something else that you could do. For me, losing everything tomorrow certainly wouldn't be the end of the world. There are, going and working with one or two founders and actually just assisting them directly would be probably my likely next choice, would be to do that. So I think, I've learned that failure isn't the end of the world. It's part of the journey. Getting back up, licking those wounds and moving forward is all that matters. Because as my wife once said, money's just money, and you can't take it with you when you're dead. So don't let that be what drives you. Let purpose be what drives you. I know that if I keep getting up every day, doing things that I enjoy and passionate about and believe in, I'm having a terrific day.
Okay. Klaus, I think that's a great way to end. So I want to thank you for coming on the show, taking your time to do this. To close out, why don't you let people, any final thoughts you have, and also where people can find you?
Yeah, Connor, so firstly, really appreciate the opportunity to come onto your podcast. I think what you're doing is fabulous, and a real value and asset to founders out there that are looking for insights and advice from others. In terms of how to find me, I'm pretty easy. With my name being relatively unique and unusual, I think I'm one of two people with my name on LinkedIn. The other person I'm also connected, so I'm pretty easily located on LinkedIn, and as a result of that, access to our website for Dreamoro and others is then easily connected. So my advice for people is I'm always available to any founder to provide any support that I can. I'm involved in various accelerator mentor programs that I like as well, and I think if we can do anything to assist founders, we will always try. So certainly open to having connections from anyone that's interested, and they should feel free to do so.
All right, Klaus. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll link your LinkedIn, your website, all in the description. Thanks again, and yeah,
Brilliant.
best of luck.
Thanks, Connor. I appreciate it.